Programming is really important. It comes up on both papers, so it's not just simply on the programming paper, it is also on the theory paper as well. So you're going to have maybe 1 or 2 programming questions on the theory paper, and then obviously in the algorithms and programming paper, you're going to get quite a few more. There is also programming on the coursework, so ultimately you can't get away from the fact that there's a lot of programming that you need to be able to do, and you need to be very proficient at all the core areas of programming that are on the spec. This means there needs to be a systematic way of learning programming. One of the things I've always found as a teacher is that some people pick up programming as if they already knew it before they even walked in my lesson, and some people really struggle with it. So this presentation is really aimed at the people who find programming harder, rather than the people who kind of take to it like duck to water. Now, over the years, I've kind of thought about how best to teach programming. I've come up with a little system which I call the mastery system. The idea is that we start off at a specific stage where we're taught a topic. So let's say we're taught about if statements, or we're taught about expressions or variables, whatever it happens to be. And in lesson, we can read the code that we're given on the board, we can kind of understand it, what's going on, and we can make maybe little small changes. This is kind of the beginning stage, okay? This is where we're kind of getting used to a new idea. Once we kind of got a bit of confidence with the idea, we can then start to use it to solve very simple problems. These problems are very sandboxed. They're only going to be using the skill that we've just learnt, maybe a few other ones that we've already looked at in the past, but fundamentally it's about practicing that core skill. Then we've got a bit of a leap between the next stage, from silver to gold. Now, at the silver stage, you're really getting confident with it. You're kind of looking at how we can apply that bit of code and how it can be used. Gold is trying to independently identify when you need it. So silver is when we tell you need this skill. Gold is when you work it out for yourself. And there's a conceptual leap between those two. So you can identify the simple problems and when that code pattern is needed. Platinum is then the next stage where you're given much more complicated programs and you're breaking it down for yourself, and then you're identifying, I need this programming skill that I've learnt previously in order to solve it. So we need code patterns to actually develop it. So on the left here, we've got all the key elements of programming you need to know about. So variables, input, output, selection, if statements, iteration, for, while loops, arrays, go up to 3D, functions, string manipulation, file handling, data structures. Now this is all the AS programming. There is obviously A2 programming as well, which includes recursion and object-oriented programming. But for now, I'm just going to focus on the basics. The best way to develop your skill is really to assess yourself on each stage. Okay, can you handle bronze? If you can't read code which has if statements in, for example, there's no way you can solve problems with it. So there's no point moving on. If you can read it and you can use it in basic ones, but you can't work out when you need it, well then you know you're kind of working on the golden mean. I've got kind of a skill spiral. So let's say you start off your first lesson looking at variables, okay, variables maybe in printing. You start off with being able to read it and being able to make small changes. You then kind of work your way up to silver and you start to use that code in very small programs. You've then started to feel a bit more confident with variables and print statements. You start to solve simple problems with it, gold, and then you're really confident and you can kind of use it completely. You then learn the next skill, which might be if statements, and again you work your way around in a nice little spiral fashion. Now, really, sometimes you might skip out the platinum stage because bronze, silver to gold is kind of where you need to be. But over time, you should hopefully be a bit more confident with platinum. So it's not a perfect spiral, but hopefully you're getting the idea of how you develop. So you need to master one skill before moving on to the next, because there's not much point trying to learn arrays if you don't know how loops work, because arrays and loops go hand in hand. There's no point learning about inputs if you don't know what a variable is. Okay, that kind of idea. So when a new program concept is introduced, we start by reading it, experimenting and adapting that code. This enables us to learn how that code works, and I refer to this as a code pattern. So code patterns is common ways of using that bit of code that you're learning. Okay, and that's the bronze section. So in the bronze section, you are really trying to recognize what that pattern looks like and just play around with it hacking. Coming back to my days as learning programming, one thing I did to learn programming is I used to find programs off the internet and I would just muck around with them. I'd just change a few values and trying to work out what they do just by playing around with it. That's the kind of spirit behind Bronze. Now, code patterns are simple blocks of code which can be used and adapted to solve specific parts of the problem. So the idea is we're trying to train ourselves to recognize what that pattern looks like and then hopefully recognize when we need it. Okay, so in Silver, once our new code has been introduced, we need to practice applying a new scenario. So we're trying to practice it so we know what the code looks like. We just need to practice using it. Okay, and this is going to help us knowing when we need to use it, and that's the crucial part of it. Some people find programming hard not because the programming itself is hard, they find the problem-solving aspect of it hard. And that's the conceptual leap between Silver and Gold. Silver is when we're in that nice, comfortable stage where we're being told this is where you use this skill, and Gold is when we have to use it for ourselves. And people find that jump between Silver and Gold very, very hard, which is why spending more time in Silver trying to recognize that problem statement, that code pattern, trying to work out when we might need it, will guide us towards when we need to use the code just through practice over and over again. Okay, there will be an assumption when we're doing this that some prior patterns have been learned. So for example, when we're learning about inputs, we'll assume you know about variables. Okay, if you don't, input becomes very difficult. So we have that kind of base knowledge which we build upon. Gold is when we start to show understanding of not only how the code works, but when it should be applied. This is the first step of problem solving. So we're trying to train this problem solving. So Bronze, Silver is learning the code itself. Gold, Platinum is about learning how to solve problems. So you need to be able to identify when a code pattern is needed and then know how to apply it in the correct way. The key behind this, and this is where people make the most mistakes, is that you need to have a very good level of mastery of the basics in order to be able to solve problems using it. So there's no point if you can't really do Silver properly, moving on to Gold. And also, if you've only done maybe one or two tasks in Silver, and then you try and do Gold, you might find that it's hard for you to identify when you need to use it. So if at any point you find Gold hard, jump back to Silver. Okay, try the Silver tasks, try and go through them all, go back over your answers in it, study them, and then try Gold again. Because what we really try and get you to learn is not only what this code does, when can I apply it, when do I need to use it. And Platinum is the granddaddy of it all. Okay, so by the time you get to Platinum, you really understood the code in a very, very deep and meaningful way. You can problem solve with it confidently. Okay, so Gold is when we're kind of making our first steps into problem solving, and the problems are still going to be quite sandbox, but require you to identify when it's needed. Platinum, they're much bigger, wider problems. You have to kind of work it out for yourself. Okay, A2 programming kind of needs the Platinum level, certainly for the basics. So you need to be able to solve problems which can be sometimes quite difficult by reading the problem, understanding when you need to apply certain code patterns, and then applying them in the right order. So A-grade students will have Platinum level of mastery. Okay, so if you want an A grade, you need to make sure you can handle Platinum tasks for pretty much every single task. So you're probably wondering, well, okay, it's all good and well having these Bronze, Silver tasks, but what on earth do they look like? Well, you can find these tasks on my website. So www.ihascodes/UOB. On this website, I've got a bunch of tasks which you can use. Okay, it's broken down into all the key sections. Each one then is further broken down into challenge 1, 2, 3, 4. Challenge 1 being Bronze, challenge 2 being Silver, and so on and so forth. In order to master programming, you need to work your way through it. Okay, so there's no shortcuts in programming. You have to do the practice. You have to go through it. If you genuinely find maybe the Bronze task really easy, move on to Silver. If at any point you get stuck, jump back. Okay, you don't necessarily have to do every single task in challenge 1 to move on to challenge 2. You kind of jump in where you need to, okay? But you need to know what stage you're at. So if you're finding the goal task really hard, then obviously it's a good indication you need to take a step backwards. So just to kind of finish off, a programmer, organism turns caffeine and pizza into software. This is kind of synonymous with the idea that actually programming takes time. Okay, learning and mastering programming does take a bit of time to actually do. You need to make sure you put the time in.